Hello and welcome to the European Parliament in Brussels. My name is Sarah Schiel. I'm Head of Communication and Outreach at the Directorate General for External Policies. And I'm here in the Vox Box of the European Parliament to host a discussion today with two very distinguished guests. Well, the European Parliament today is hosting a very large-scale event. We are marking the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration on Human Rights. So today, in and around the Parliament, we are going to be joined by a large number of high-profile specialists, activists, human rights defenders, both from inside the EU and its institutions, and also from around the world. We wanted to profit from the presence of some of these guests to make a stock-taking on the situation, in particular, in Ukraine. I'm very happy to welcome our two guests who have joined me to do just that. Let me introduce them. On my right-hand side, I have Mr. Udo Bullmann. He's member of the European Parliament and chair of the European Parliament's subcommittee on human rights. Welcome, Udo Bullmann. Thank you for being here.
Morning.
And on my left-hand side, I have Oleksandra Matviichuk. She is head of the Center of Civil Liberties in Ukraine. This is an organization which promotes human rights, democratic reforms, and is very active also on issues such as evidence on Russian war crimes, on the situation of prisoners. This center and Oleksandra herself have received numerous awards in recognition of their work, and I will mention just one or two. The Center for Civil Liberties won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2022, and they were also a representative of the Ukrainian people who won the Sakharov Prize, which is the European Parliament's annual human rights award, also in 2022. Oleksandra, it's wonderful to have you with us. Welcome to Parliament and thank you for being here.
Thank you for the invitation.
We wanted, as we say, to make a stock-taking and look at what is happening in Ukraine at the moment. It is, of course, a country that has been very much centre in the work of the European Parliament, and not least your committee, Mr. Bullmann, the subcommittee on human rights. And you very recently travelled to Ukraine. Less than a month ago, you visited Kyiv, but also you visited areas outside Kyiv which had been retaken, let's say, from Russian occupation. You wanted to meet with victims of war crimes and witnesses. Can you tell us a little bit about that mission, your impressions, and what comes next after the mission?
For my colleagues and myself, it was of utmost importance not to only go to Kiev, but also to see people who have suffered even more. And that was the reason why, with the help and the support of Oleksandra and other friends, that we were able to go to Chernihiv region in the north of Kiev, to see witnesses, to talk to victims, and to get a real idea of what was happening and what is still happening in the Ukraine. I think war turns people, unfortunately, into numbers. But only if you talk to individuals, to your next neighbors that suffered so much from this war of aggression, you feel people. You feel the need of solidarity and support. And perhaps this is also the first step of justice, to listen and to understand. And we got a lot of positive things out of our visit on which we can work further in our mission in the European Parliament.
Thank you. Well, you mentioned indeed that the numbers are very big, and behind every number is a person, is an individual story. Oleksandra, you've been working since long before the current invasion of Ukraine. Your organization has been active since, I think, 2007. You were also very active in Euromaidan, which is more or less 10 years ago now. But more recently, of course, you've had to deal with the horrific impact of the full invasion of Ukraine. Can you give me a snapshot of your current work at the moment and the situation in Ukraine?
When large-scale invasion started, we faced with unprecedented numbers of war crimes. And in order To respond to this challenge, we united our efforts with dozens of regional organizations. We built all Ukrainian network of local documentators. We covered the whole country, including occupied territories. And now, in our joint database Tribunal for Putin initiative, we jointly documented more than 57,000 episodes of war crimes. And 57,000, it's an enormous amount, but still a tip of iceberg, because Russia uses war crimes as the methods of warfare. Russia attempts to break people's resistance and occupy Ukraine by inflicting the immense pain on civilian population. So we document this pain. But from the last year, I start to ask to myself, for whom do we document all these crimes for? Because as a lawyer, I understood that we face with accountability gap. First, there is no international court who can prosecute Putin and top political leadership and high military command of Russian state for the crime of aggression. And that is why part of our job is promoting the idea of creation a special tribunal on aggression to hold these people accountable. And second, the vast majority of these crimes will be burden of responsibility of national system. And national system is overloaded. So we have to find a way how to make the national system stronger to be able to provide a chance for justice for each person affected by this war.
You're referring to Ukrainian national system?
Sure, yes. Because we have the International Criminal Court investigation, and it's very important, but International Criminal Court will limit its investigation only to several selected cases. This means that the vast majority of cases will be the responsibility of national investigators and national justice system.
Understood. I think that one thing that has been striking and remarkable about the situation in Ukraine is its military resilience against a bigger and better armed neighbor. But how is the resilience among the population? Because as you say, people are hurting and everyone has lost loved ones. How do you keep resilience going in the face of such tragedy?
The war probably is the most horrible things which can happen. So I will be honest, it's difficult for everybody in Ukraine. But we have no other choice. This war has a genocidal character. Putin openly said that there is no Ukrainian nation, there is no Ukrainian language, there is no Ukrainian culture. Then the Russian propagandists interpret this, and they openly said to the Russian TV that Ukrainians has to be either re-educated as Russians or killed. And then in the ground, we see how Russian troops deliberately exterminate all local elites, priests, journalists, volunteers, artists, how they take in Ukrainian children and transfer them to Russia to educate them as Russians, how they ban Ukrainian language and culture and destroy purposefully Ukrainian heritage. So, yes, it's difficult, but if we stop fighting, there will be no more us.
Yeah. Udo Bullmann, you're chair of the subcommittee on human rights, so obviously you are very active on human rights issues, not only in Ukraine, but in other places around the world. And as we know, there are plenty of conflicts, unfortunately, around the world. Russia's war of aggression, I think, as Oleksandra just said, is also trying to reduce Ukrainian or eliminate Ukrainian identity and eliminate its capacity to act as a democratic society with regular democratic norms and values. So for that reason alone, I think it's one of the reasons why in the European Union we are strongly supporting Ukraine. Beyond that, there's probably broader lessons for all of us. What's at stake, in your view, for human rights in general? What should we be fighting for? What is Ukraine telling us that we should be fighting for? And maybe if I add to that, you know, you're a parliamentarian, you go and talk to voters. What if a voter says to you, this is not really my top concern, I'm more worried about money, inflation, jobs, etc.?
This is not the reaction that I get.
Yeah, yeah.
In my constituency, which is a huge part of Germany, the state of Hesse, Frankfurt, Kassel, Gießen, the south of Frankfurt. If I go to people, to journalists, and tell them what we saw, they are dearly interested. They fill the local newspapers with what we have to tell. And once we start to talk, I find a journalist interviewing me on our last trip, telling me, well, in my house, we welcomed Ukrainian people because we feel with them. So there is a huge amount of personal solidarity, and the understanding in the country I know best, in Germany, but also in other countries, is really, really big. Coming back to the core of the question, what is the learning story? What can we do about it? Well, first of all, individual justice has to be brought back to the communities as good as possible, as good as possible. Nobody can give you back your most beloved friends, neighbors, family members. But where is it possible to give back, recognize crimes, and give back assets, rebuild houses, rebuild homes? It has to be done. My personal position is, and political position of the European Parliament, also including using the assets of Russian authorities that we can get hold of here in the European Union. But more, and Oleksandra was talking already about that, this war of aggression highlights the weaknesses of the international judicial system that has to be strengthened, where we, those countries in which it is possible to go after these crimes, do it immediately, of course, in collaboration with Ukrainian authorities, the judicial system. We have to strengthen and to support the judicial system, yes, and we have also to go for new international modes, criminal courts, international tribunes, whatever is necessary and possible and useful. The most impressive thing for me is my personal learning story, to what degree human rights are a building block of the new Ukraine. This is what you can feel while talking to people. I saw a very vivid civic society structures, great people like Oleksandra and others, building a new Ukraine on the basis of human rights, on the basis of dignity, on the basis of justice. And this is the European spirit which we have to support.
And this can also be the learning for us as well. No, I'm happy to hear you say that. And indeed, it is true that in Eurobarometer polls, the support of European citizens for Ukraine remains very solid, very steady. And of course, we have to make sure it stays that way. Oleksandra, maybe a question on prisoners, because this is something where you have been active again for many years. But in the last couple of years, we've seen thousands of Ukrainians, as you mentioned, taken prisoner. Another issue that is very heartbreaking is to see Ukrainian children being forcibly transferred, removed from their families and taken away. Are you working on that, and where do you see the possibility for justice and accountability?
It's a very sensitive topic for us as a human rights lawyers, because we can't rely on legal instrument for current moment to solve this problem. Russia publicly ignores all norms of international humanitarian and international criminal law and refuse to fulfill decisions of international organizations. And we have different groups of people. We have prisoners of the war. It's soldiers of Ukrainian armed forces, which was taken into captivity. We have illegally detained civilians, and thousands of them. We don't know the real numbers. Only our initiative is working on the cases of more than 4,000 people. And this group means that people which are civilians can't be taken in captivity. They have to be released immediately without any conditions, without any exchanges. But Russia keep them in captivity, treat them badly, torture them, and we have no tools how to release these people. And their family in despair, because it's very difficult to know what's going on and can't do nothing with it. And also you mentioned the children, which is, I think, a disaster, because it's the most vulnerable group of society during the war. And these children are educated as Russians, and we have the impact of such a policy. Look into the children who was in occupied territories in 2014, I mean Luhansk and Donetsk region, which appeared after Russian occupation for 8 years, and how they were brainwashed for these 8 years before large-scale invasion started. So we tried to find creative solutions. And one of the ways which we use is our cooperation with Russian human rights defenders. Yes, they have no much influence to the situation because Russia is a repressive country, but for us, in a lot of cases, they are the only way how to do something on the ground.
Okay. You're here in the European Parliament in Brussels today. You'll have the opportunity, of course, to meet members of the Parliament and I'm sure other high-level people in the institutions. What do you want from them? What's your message to them?
My message is very clear. When large-scale invasion started, the international partners said, let's help Ukraine not to fail. And Ukraine obtained the first weapons to be able to defend ourselves. And first sanctions against Russia were introduced into force. And we are extremely grateful because it's helped us to survive. But this is a time to change this narrative. Let's help Ukraine to win. Because there is a huge differences between let's help Ukraine not to fail and let's help Ukraine to win. And for us, as for human rights defenders, the only way how to stop human rights abuses in occupied territories is to release people who live there.
And you mentioned that you worked with the Parliament when recently we sent a delegation to Ukraine. How do you see the role of the European Parliament in keeping the struggle alive and helping Ukraine to win?
I want to say that European Parliament and especially concrete people there play a proactive role. And this is very important because we can speak a lot about common values, but values need proactive position, values need proactive solidarity, and we never forget those people who was with us during this dramatic time of our history.
Okay. Udo Bullmann, maybe the same question for you. From the European Parliament perspective, what can we do, what should we do, and how do you think things look as we run up to European elections in 2024?
Well, first of all, Sarah, and you mentioned the world is burning.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, in the Ukraine, but also in many other places. So one of our most important tasks at the very moment is keeping the Ukraine on the agenda #1 for us, so that we do not stop with our awareness, so that we do not stop in collaborating with our friends and giving support to them on all different areas of their needs. Humanitarian aid, health system, reorganizing infrastructure, and also, Oleksandra said it, weapons. They need means for self-defense because we are in a critical situation. She rightly explained that to us, and we cannot stay idle or silent in this very critical situation. Full stop on that, first of all. Secondly, of course, we have to realize, and that is also a challenge for the European Union, Putin's war of aggression brought a new dynamic in the relationship of our countries, which you have not chosen, which we did not choose. But this dynamic enters into a new stage of development of the European Union, which we now have to proactively design in the best interest of all of us, together with our friends in the Ukraine and others also. So we have to shape a new European Union where there is space for our friends. And that will be the task for the next years and the next decades.
Absolutely. I'm going to bring this discussion to a close. I want to thank you, Oleksandra Matviichuk, very much for coming along to talk to us. Wish you all the best for your ongoing work, which is so important. And I also want to thank you, Udo Bullmann, for coming to talk to us ahead of a busy day for you, and wish you also all the best in your ongoing work. Thank you and goodbye from Brussels.